Oh, that's better.
All right. All right. So welcome to the May meeting of 5 Miles from Anywhere. I'm just going to, so today, let me just share my screen for a second. Screen. There we go.
Shoot, I lost it now.
All right. So welcome to, for those of you who've never been here before, welcome to the May 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. We are an international Sherlock Holmes Silent Society, and as of August 2020, we are an official Silent Society of the BSI.
Oh.
So today we're going to be discussing Sherlock Holmes in comics.
Oh, I like that cover.
Yeah, not a cool one? We're going to be talking about this series in a minute. So for today, we're just going to do some updates. Then Brian will give his talk on Sherlock Holmes in comics. Jerry Margolin, am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Jerry? Yep. Is it Margolin?
That's okay. It. You got it.
Correct. Awesome. If for those of you who don't know, he has the largest collection of Sherlock Holmes artwork of anybody in the world. And he's going to share some of the comics from his collection. He's also been gracious enough to tell us he will give a presentation in the fall or show us a little bit of his collection. And it's a very impressive collection from some of the articles I've read on him. So it's very, very cool. Then we'll have our discussion, and I'll tell you a little about the June meeting topic. So that's where we're going today. So just as a little update, I don't know if Jay Ganguly is going to make it today because she's been putting together the Baker Street Almanac, and she did contact me yesterday, and we're going to be featured. We'll have a section on 5 Miles from Anywhere in the 2020 Baker Street Almanac. It has a short description of the group, and it will have a list of all the presenters in 2020 and their topics. So if you were one of our presenters in 2020, you'll be featured in there. If you were one of the ones so far this year, you'll also be in next year's, the 2021 edition. So I thought that was cool. Also, just to plan ahead, that in July, we are going to take a brief hiatus. So we will not be gathering the first weekend of July. We will come back, we'll do June, we'll come back in August. And we are looking for presenters for autumn and for winter. So if you're interested in giving a talk on a story from the canon or a Sherlock Holmes topic, please let me know. As always, we've had some really cool talks here. I'm going to share an update on one of them in a second. But really, it's been really great and really enjoyed it. And I think it's really helped keep people in touch during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to, and I don't think Tom is on today. I don't think he could make it, but I wanted to congratulate Thomas Burns because his story that he shared with us, the Camberwell poisoning case, is in the current issue of the Strand magazine. And so the feedback we were able to give to him when he shared his story with us, he did do another edit, and he did say that it made his story better, and it got published in the Strand, which is very cool. So if you go to your local bookstore or Barnes and Noble, you can pick it off the shelf, and you can read the final version of his take on the Camberwell poisoning case. So if you're a Sherlock Holmes author, like if you write Pastiches and would like to give a little presentation, you're welcome to do that. Just let me know. And the only requirement we have is whatever we share is free to the members. Okay, so you can't charge, say, oh, get this book to read my story. You have to give us a free PDF. We'll keep it just to the members of 5 Miles to Anywhere. Okay. All right. Any other announcements before we move on?
We're good.
Okay. I did also want to, in case, just to give a shout out for Robin there, in case you missed it, we had a really cool, we had a good interview with him He is in the current book, Sherlock Holmes of Baking Street. And we did some author interviews for that particular book, and a really cool one from Robin, who gives, if you don't know, he gives tours of London, gives Sherlock Holmes tours of London. He's a London tour guide. And so, I can't wait, Robin, when this is all done, to get across the pond and to be able to join you.
Hey, Derek.
Absolutely.
Derek,
Okay, yes, yes.
I didn't know if you put 2 and 2 together, but Judy Margolin is my wife.
Yes, I did. And that's
Okay,
right.
I
And
wasn't
Judy's got
sure
a
if you-
wonderful article. And in fact, Jerry, at some point I want to talk to Judy because like her, I'm a special education teacher. And at some point I'd love to chat with her about her
You can
career.
say hi, she's right here.
Hi, Judy.
Hey, Judy.
Judy, at some point I'd like to talk to you because I'm also a special education teacher. I teach, I'm the chair of my department in Thornton, Colorado. So high school level.
Yeah, anytime you want to Zoom, just let me know and we can set that up. Yeah,
Absolutely.
46 years as a special educator and 2 years as a university supervisor so far.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. And Larry Feldman, who's also in here, was also a special education teacher for his career as well. So it's kind of cool. We have a lot of teachers in the group, which is really nice.
Okay.
But thank you for that interview. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay. And I see that Jay Ganguly did join us. Jay, how's the Baker Street Almanac coming along?
Oh, thank you for that, Derek. You are a lifesaver.
Hey, Jay.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Jay.
Jay.
How is everything? You doing all
Pretty
right?
good. Pretty good.
I hope you're keeping safe.
Oh, yeah. We have shut ourselves in. We are not going out. We are not letting anybody come in. So,
Gotcha.
no, that's it.
Makes sense.
Be
Yeah,
well.
definitely. Yeah, stay safe, Jay. For those who don't know, Jay is in India right now. And she's one of our members of our board because we have an international board for the group. So good to see you. I'm sure you're probably editing all weekend, Jay. All right. So,
Oh, boy.
all right. So one of the things that came up, I always post to a bunch of different Sherlock Holmes groups at on Facebook to kind of let people know
Well, I am.
is and to invite everybody in. And,
Hour, 2 hours.
and so one of the questions that came up, one unhappy person put online, and I didn't actually particularly know this person, but their comment was, perhaps I am old, but this strikes me as an unworthy topic. So Sherlock Holmes in comics being an unworthy topic. And so, I do want to say though, do the naysayers have a point? This is an actual quote from the back of this, as Ron said, what a cool looking series. And it's a really fun series. The Adventure of the Three Students is part of this Graphic Planet series. And they've done most of the stories from the canon, even some ones like Black Peter, okay? So this is an actual quote from the back of the Adventures of the Three Students and in all of the series that it said between 1887 and 1927, Doyle wrote 66 stories and 3 novels about Holmes. I have to imagine that this would be Holmes's reaction. And imagine, because I have no idea where the heck they ever got those numbers from. We could play around with the 66 stories, but how the heck do you get 3 novels? So I don't know. But so, they just have to remember they have to do, everybody, no matter who, has to do some research and do it well. However, one of the things I think is really important here is that Holmes and art, they've always been linked together. That picture from, these pictures from Paget of Holmes and Watson, I don't know if we'd have such an intense relationship with these characters if it wasn't for those illustrations. I think, without Paget, I don't know if he would have been as connected to the audience in the time period, and therefore have become immortal, you know? And so I think really comics makes perfect sense to talk about, and Holmes and comics really are important, okay? And I really think that these do make sense to do together. So I appreciate that Brian volunteered to do this topic. Sean, I appreciate that you put in the chat that this topic got you to show up. And I like all the positive comments we're seeing in the chat about comics, because I fully agree with you guys. I think that this is an appropriate topic and is an important topic. And Holmes tied to any artwork is really good. So without much further ado, we're going to get to Brian's topic here. I love this panel, by the way. This is from a Superman comic in which Superman brought Sherlock Holmes to life. It's cool because he wished a storybook figure to come to life, and he brought Sherlock Holmes, which is really, really cool. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second to get Brian set up for his PowerPoint here.
Right.
Okay, and
All right.
and here we go. Okay. All right, Brian, just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slides, but his
All
talk
right.
is Sherlock Holmes in Comics, a brief history and overview. So let's give it up for Brian.
Yay.
Good, good.
Well, you touched on some of the things I wanted to say in my intro here. As Sherlockians, we are all familiar with Sherlock Holmes stories, novels, movies, TV shows, radio shows, plays, songs, video games, etc. You don't hear a lot about Holmes in comics, though, and it's a shame because he's been a part of comics for over 100 years, since the dawn of comics themselves. And there's some really interesting stuff out there. So for today's meeting, I wanted to do something a little different and a little fun. I'm going to give everyone a general history of Holmes in comics, and I mean general. There's so much material out there that this is just going to touch on some of the major points. And then I'm going to show some of the different ways in which Holmes has been portrayed, like with Superman in that last panel. And then we'll discuss those two short stories we shared with everyone. So, Derek, if you could do the slide. This, as far as I can tell, this is the earliest example of a Sherlock Holmes comic, at least based on Sherlock Holmes. It is called Sherlock Holmes. It's from 1907. As you can see, it's very basic story and art, and it's very broad slapstick. And hey, you got to start somewhere. The exact year, by the way, that comics were created is debatable, but it's generally considered 1896 with the debut of the Yellow Kid newspaper strip. So this is just a decade after comics were invented at all, and they're already turning to Holmes for source material. And I mean, at this point, we didn't even have his last bow. We didn't have Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. Doyle had many more stories to write for the canon. So the fact that we're already seeing Holmes-based material, I think, is interesting. Now, the earliest example of a traditional canonical Holmes would be a few decades later. Derek? In 1930, the newspaper strip Sherlock Holmes debuted. It was by artist Leo Amelia, and this ran through the early 1930s in several American newspapers. And these were adaptations of the canon. So you had the Gloria Scott, Silver Blaze, the Musgrave Ritual, and so forth. All the text taken directly from the canon. And again, it's not quite there yet. You had a traditional 4-panel grid. These are just 2 blow-ups here. You don't have word balloons. You don't have the different type of perspective art that you would see in traditional comics. But it was a great way to introduce a lot of readers to Holmes here, especially before the Basil Rathbone movies. Now, by the 1950s, if we could slide, that's really a comic. Nope, back up one, please. Derek, if you could back up one.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me, I might have to
Okay.
stop sharing just for a sec to back up.
Okay.
That was my bad.
Earth 221. Joanna,
Is it
that would
the
be Earth
Classics Illustrated one,
221B.
Brian?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be.
Oh, I see it. I gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Sorry
Canonical
about that, guys.
DC,
Hmm.
canonical DC Earth names are usually just letters or numbers, not both. Sorry, being a
Yeah,
comic.
but Holmes, of course, is the exception to the rule. Okay, so by the 1950s, there was we now have a short-lived news. Derek.
Keep going. Sorry, dude.
Go
Sorry
back.
about that. I don't know what's going on here.
All right.
One last time. I'll fix it.
Okay.
It's only when your
But
brother.
anyways, yes, the in answer to the question, was that last strip a real comic? I would argue yes, because of Hal Foster's strips in Tarzan and Prince Valiant are considered comics. And it's the same thing where you've got text on the bottom and a picture on the top,
Right.
no word balloons.
Free word balloon, yes.
Right. So,
Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
Brian,
Here we
just
go.
This was a
Brian,
reprint
just remember, this is what happens when you let your brother run your PowerPoint.
There we go.
after you
I know.
beat him up when you were a kid.
Steve's right.
okay, so in the 1950s, we have another newspaper strip originally titled Sherlock Holmes. By now, these are what we consider standard comics. These are pastiches, so they're very inventive. They get to play around with Holmes. In fact, this strip, if you see, he's teamed up with Toulouse-Lautrec here to solve a case. And we have word balloons. We have panels of different sizes and lengths here. We're playing around with angles. And if the art style looks familiar, that's because the artist is Frank Jacoa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But the artist there worked on nearly every Marvel and DC character up until the 1980s and was the co-creator of The Punisher. So for those of you who are wondering what the Sherlock Holmes Punisher connection was, you're looking right at it.
Yeah, but Edith Meiser is really the news because she's the one that wrote most of the radio episodes that Basil Rathbone appeared in of Sherlock Holmes radio episodes. So Edith Meiser is the writer is actually even more interesting to us.
There you go, see? And when radio is starting to peter out, you turn to comics to keep the stories coming. Now, Derek. Now then, I'm sure at least some of you here had some of these issues as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, classic comics illustrated. Most people, when they think of comics and Holmes, this is what they're thinking of. For those of you who don't know, Classic Comics Illustrated was a long-running series where every issue featured a different famous novel redone as a comic. Basically, there were generations of students who were assigned books to read. They didn't want to read Ivanhoe or The Count of Monte Cristo, so they would buy the Classics Illustrated adaptation and hope they would pass their English quiz on Monday.
Like
Guilty of
Monarch
that.
notes later on and Cliff Notes.
But as you see, Holmes appeared a few times in Classics Illustrated. There are adaptations of Hound of the Baskervilles, Study in Scarlet, and The Sign of Four.
Yeah. There's a Sign of the Four.
Oh, you've got it.
Yeah, well, this one's at a reprint of the Sign of the Four in it anyway.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes, it's a three-fer.
Yeah.
Eric,
Now,
this is the original cover.
Yes.
oh,
All right.
That's the
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome. When we get done the presentation, let's watch that. Let's see that in the
I'll
full
tell you
screen.
Dan, I want to horn in on your.
No,
yeah.
that's great. Do you want me to pause it and share your screen, or do you want to wait? Let's wait till the end, Jerry. Okay?
Yes, let's share the screen.
We
Yeah,
will.
go ahead,
We'll wait till the end. We'll share everything. Okay, Ron?
Yeah, I want to hear the rest.
Okay.
We're gonna see all of Jerry's artwork. Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
So,
Brian, back to you.
All right, Derek, if you could advance to the next screen, please.
There you go.
All right. In 1955, Sherlock Holmes gets his very own comic series, once again called Sherlock Holmes. It's a 2-issue Charlton series. These are pastiches that put Holmes in the modern times of the 1950s. It was not approved by the Doyle estate, and the theory is that that is why this only lasted 2 issues, although for those of us who read the story in advance that came from here, the quality of the stories might have had something to do with it too. So after this, a few years later, and Derek, Dell Comics actually gets permission from the Doyle estate. You look at the very bottom, you can see copyright estate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And once again, very short pastiches. And once again, it only lasted 2 issues. So he's having a problem sustaining a series here. We skip ahead to 1970s, and then we get the major comic people involved. DC Comics decided to give Holmes his own series. Once again, it's called Sherlock Holmes. This only lasted for 1 issue, and it was a double adaptation of The Final Problem and The Adventure of the Empty House. Having looked through the artwork, yeah, look at that artwork. It is, I do not know why this didn't last, because it's, what I've seen of it is gorgeous. But a few years later, Marvel decided to give it a try in their Marvel Preview magazine, which is where they try out properties to see if it can last for a series. And they did an adaptation of Hound of the Baskervilles for 2 issues, and that just didn't go anywhere. So for one of the greatest literary characters of all times, Holmes does seem to have a problem sustaining his own series. I don't know if it's the writing or if it's the Doyle estate, but it's only been in the last decade or so that we've seen an ongoing Sherlock Holmes pastiche series that's able to sustain and grow an audience. Derek? So here we see a series called, again, Sherlock Holmes. Now, this series is written by Alan Moore's daughter, Leah Moore, and her husband, John Reppion. And from what I understand, this has been selling fairly well. They do little 4 to 6 issue runs, as you can see, The Liverpool Demon, The Vanishing Man, and then they get collected as a trade paperback. Just on a note, yesterday I went to my local comic store to get one of these issues just to flip through for our meeting. I didn't see any issues on the shelves or in the back issue bins. I didn't see any of the trade paperbacks. And when I asked the clerk if they had any, she looked at me kind of funny and said, "No, that's subscription only." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" It says, "Well, we know it's not going to sell. So we'll only get it for you if we know that you're going to come in and pick it up." So apparently even comic stores don't have faith in a Holmes ongoing series, even though, again, sales have been good from everything I was able to find.
Well, the pandemic is part of that. That's true of my comic book store generally, with even DC and Marvel comics. You've got to put yourself down for a comic or they won't get it for you.
Yeah.
Also, with the rise of eBay, the back issue market isn't what it was. So a lot of stores do order to sell out of things. They don't order for back stock anymore.
Right.
Oh yeah, I remember the black and white implosion of the 1980s, and everyone got very careful about what they were going to buy after that. But there you go, is a very brief history of Holmes starring in his own comics. What I'd like to do now is show some of the different ways in which Holmes gets portrayed in comics, and then we'll go into those 2 stories. So first of all, adaptation. You already saw the ones that Derek had shown you earlier. I mean, Holmes adaptations are fairly common in comics. They go back to that newspaper strip of the 1930s and the Classics Illustrateds. These are 2 editions by an art author, Peter Kopel. He writes them, he draws, well, he adapts them and he draws them. And he's done graphic novels versions of Scandal in Bohemia, Hound of the Baskervilles, Final Problem. They're also available from MX Publishing on their site as well. And aside from adaptations, we have adaptations of adaptations. Derek? These are two very different examples here. On the left, there was a graphic novel of the Gillette stage play and the movie. This is called Sherlock Holmes, The Painful Predicament of Alice Faulkner. It's very close to the Gillette movie, and the artwork is very similar to Edward Gorey's style. On the other hand, we have manga adaptations. The BBC authorized manga. Nope, back up. We'll get to that in a second.
Went too far again, Brian.
Derek?
I don't think I skipped a slide. I think that's the next slide.
I didn't. No, I was still
Back one
talking.
because we saw it.
Oh, okay. Hold up.
This is like that subliminal advertising, isn't it? You know, slipping in things you don't know.
Right. But anyways, adaptations of adaptations. There's also an adaptation of the Neil Gaiman story, A Study in Emerald, that's been turned into a comic. And that you can actually, I've seen in the bookstores, probably because it's by Neil Gaiman. No? Oh, there we go.
Brian, you only get it by subscription.
Well, I don't know. These mangas are you can find in any Barnes and Noble. I know that.
No, I mean you only get the right slide from your brother by
Oh, I see.
Is this the right slide? Does you want to be on this one?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because the manga on the right, Study in Pink. I know they're currently adapting the episode Scandal in Belgravia, and that's going to be released later this year. Again, they're trying to make it look as close to the actual BBC show as possible there. So adaptations of adaptations. Next are pastiches. And again, this is where I get excited because comics are a great way to tell stories. Sherlock Holmes is a natural fit for these. I'm very surprised that more creators haven't taken advantage of the medium. We saw the early Charlton and Dell Comics 2-issue series, and we've got two examples here. The one on the left is a Dark Horse series. From what I understand, it sticks close to the canonical Holmes, but these are all pastiches. And on the right, well, zombies are popular. What can I tell you? Again, supposedly it's a very canonical version of Holmes battling zombies. So there you go.
Like Terry Thomas with those teeth.
Yeah, really. Next is my favorite type of Holmes in comic is Holmes as a guest star in somebody else's series. I would recommend these to start. On the left, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Now, I'm not talking about the Sean Connery movie. I'm talking about Alan Moore's excellent comic series. If you haven't read it, I strongly urge you to do so. The first volume features Holmes, Mycroft, and Moriarty. I cannot recommend it highly enough. There is a scene where they actually show the fight between Holmes and Moriarty at the Reichenbach Falls. That's Moriarty in the upper right corner of that issue, by the way. And you can even Google the specific scene if you don't want to buy the book, but highly recommended. And on the right, for the 50th anniversary of Detective Comics, Batman got to team up with Sherlock Holmes in a story, and it's a wonderful story. It involves an unpublished 61st story of the canon that Moriarty's descendants are after. So any Sherlockians should have this in their collection. It's a lot of fun.
It's been republished, by the way, as part of this graphic novel collection.
There you go.
DC's Detective Greatest Stories Ever Told. It's got the cover on the cover. So
there you go. If you don't want to track it down through comic stores or eBay.
Yeah, and those you can pick up pretty easily in Amazon or a comic store.
Excellent. Excellent. Next, we have spin-offs. On the left, the Irene Adler series. I am not familiar with it, but what I understand is that it's similar to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where Irene leads a team of all-female hero crime fighters. It's not how she was described in the canon, so I'm assuming that's just a different outfit. On the right is a series I actually picked up a few years ago, starring Moriarty. That one assumes that Moriarty won at the Reichenbach Falls and has regretted it ever since. And the plot of the Moriarty comic, at least when I was reading it, was that Watson and Lestrade have come to Moriarty to help them find Mycroft, who has gone missing. So if you can track that down, it's a little rare at this point, but it's a good read. And then after that, we have examples of alternate universe Holmes. And as you can see, it can be very different. On the left is a short-lived series from the 1980s called Baker Street. This imagined a female Holmes named Sharon Ford, who was investigating a series of murders in the London punk scene. Very, very out there, not very Holmesian at all, but still, it's pretty wild if you're a Holmes completist. And on the right, it's the Muppets. Say no more. You gotta love it. It's actually very close to the canon, I must say. They did a great job with Muppet Sherlock Holmes, and I would recommend that, especially to young readers. It's a lot of fun. Now, there's also the series of books called the Sheer Luck series by Dean Wilkinson. Those are more like activity books, but that's also a good one for kids. Now, I mean, I wanted to go on and on. Like I said, I really had to rein myself in to keep just enough examples to give everyone a taste. And I wanted to talk about things like Ruse and Detective Chimp and things like that. But does anybody have any questions or comments before we get into the two stories we read?
Do we really know why they failed? I mean,
the answer is usually sales, right?
Yeah, sales. The theory, when I looked up the one about the original Charlton series, the 2-issue one, they said they thought that the Doyle estate had stepped in and shut it down because they were operating without permission. I know that Marvel used to do licensed series in the 70s for Godzilla and the Shogun Warriors, and they ended up canceling them because of the licensing fees they had to pay on top of everything else. So that is possible why, Holmes just peters out every so often, but you don't need to pay the Doyle estate now, so I don't know why.
Marvel also did licensed Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu in the 70s for their Shang-Chi series, and they had several references to Holmes in that series as well.
But did he actually show up?
No.
They had a character that was like his nephew or something.
Right.
And I think his father was supposed to be James Bond.
Right.
Oh, right, the Sean Connery character.
The same guy, yeah.
So Brian, I was going to say one of the better ones where he does a guest appearance, if you've not seen it, is the Deadpool. He's in a Deadpool comic strip. And
really?
Yes. And Deadpool does not treat him very well. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I had this one where he meets Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Oh, perfect.
Remember?
Yep.
Absolutely. They've got Darren McGavin and Jeremy Brett, obviously. And
to get back to the cancellation question, pre-1980s, they didn't have a lot of really accurate sales figures, and they were still newsstand, which meant that they were printing 3 times as many as they actually sold, and they did have to deal with returns and pulping and things.
That's
true. A lot of the sales, or whether something was considered a success, was sort of a gut feel and who wanted to continue what and whether they had the material. So, I did want to mention, you didn't mention one of my favorite recent, in the last 10 years, comic series is Self-Made Hero did a series of the 4 novels, the adaptations. including which everybody forgets. These are out of print, but can be found easily on Comixology. All 4 are by Ian Edgington and Ian Culbard as the artist.
Okay.
They did the, like I said, they did the 4 novels, and they're nice reads. They're faithful adaptations with some nice edits to make it work in the comic format. So
Excellent. Yeah, Ian Edgington also did the zombie one I showed earlier.
And Brian, I would be remiss, Rusty pointed out that our Baker Street Elementary comic strip is probably the longest running comics, Sherlock Holmes comic strip now. So,
that's true.
We've been doing it for 6 years now. So
I'd also like to mention, you surprised you didn't bring up Martin Powell's Scarlet and Gaslight and Case of Blind Fear, in which Holmes encounters Dracula and the Invisible Man, respectively. Those are almost classics in the comics of Sherlock Holmes at this point.
Again, because I knew there was going to be a lot of discussion, and I still want to talk about the 2 stories, I had to really rein it in. I wanted to bring up his appearance in Kid Eternity, the Joker issue. Again, we can go on and on. But let's move on to the stories, and then we can look at some of that artwork as well. Derek? Okay. The story that didn't even have an apostrophe for Holmes. What did we all think of this story, everyone?
I want to know what he was doing in Canada in the 1970s. That was my big question.
50s.
Dressed in a deerstalker.
By himself.
Trying to solve the Scarlet Claw.
Yeah, I was thinking that he was filming the Scarlet Claw. That's what I was.
There you go. There you go. These all the stories in those Charlton comics are like this. There's like 3 or 4 of these per issue. Very basic. I mean, really, these are interchangeable with any detective. I think they were just using Sherlock Holmes just to attract readers.
I found it interesting that the artists seemed to have like one face for Sherlock, and most of the time it involved a pipe.
I know. We're perpetually smoking a pipe in these.
I think there was maybe only 1 or 2 panels where he doesn't have a pipe in his mouth. in that one. He's definitely a chain smoker in this one.
I'm sure, when we get into Jerry's art, I'm sure he'll tell us. He'll mention the fact that there are 3. It's called the Holy Three to identify Sherlock Holmes. There's the deerstalker cap, there's the pipe, and there's the magnifying glass. And those are the things that identify Sherlock Holmes. So if you're doing Sherlock Holmes art, it almost always has one of those 3 things in it.
Maybe this was a 50 pipe problem.
I don't think it was a very difficult mystery. I think it was the same pipe throughout the whole time. It was a 1 pipe problem.
Yeah.
Larry, that's a prerequisite whenever I contact an artist for a commission. The only thing I tell them is Holmes needs to be dressed traditionally, deerstalker, Inverness, magnifying glass and or pipe. The rest I leave to their imagination, but I'm a traditionalist and I want my Holmes dressed that way.
Absolutely.
Even in the city where he shouldn't dress like that.
Well, the pieces that I get, he's never sitting.
Right.
There's usually some sort of action, something or other.
Right.
Yeah. Before we move on, can we all agree that this is the most inaccurately named Sherlock Holmes story of all time?
Yeah.
There's only one suspect.
Yes.
It may be an incorrect thing, but it's got the best closing. I don't think anything in the canon has anything better than great jumping cats.
Yeah. I know, it was great.
I don't know who would say that. in a normal Sherlock Holmes, God, I've forgotten her name, Mrs. Hudson.
Yeah.
Great jumping cat.
Yes.
It was a classic line, huh, Michael?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds
I
like
think
something
now
Perry White
we have to
would say.
end every meeting with that. Great jumping.
Okay, Derek, can we go to the next one? Okay. So for this, I actually was able to contact the creator, Alex Robinson, and he gave his permission for us to share this. Again, this is one of the reasons why I had to use these two stories, is because most of the other stories are still under copyright, so I couldn't really share them. But that said, what did everyone think of this story?
Well, the first thing I noticed was when he says, your accent tells me that you were raised in Philadelphia, the northern side of Snyder Avenue, I believe. That sounds more like Henry Higgins and Sherlock Holmes, doesn't it?
But Holmes knew the accent.
A big mania telling where people live by the street.
Well, he would tell people where they live by the accent, by their accent.
Yeah.
Holmes used to do that, though, also.
But one of the things that I found interesting with this one is definitely the author and artist seems to know his home stuff, but he has some inaccuracies or outright mistakes in there, saying that, that Holmes and Watson met on March 4th, 1881, and that Holmes invited Watson to live with him in Baker Street. But one of the things
he rented a room to him.
Well, but one of the things I thought was, I wonder, and this would be, I don't know, was it a mistake on purpose because this is a very elderly, over 100 years old Holmes in the story? And is that like his mind, is it because maybe this really isn't Holmes? Or is there, did he just make mistakes? I just wondered, with the way that the story is very, it kind of, it's lucid, but it's not, and it kind of fades a bit. I thought it was a pretty creative story, but that was one of my questions. Are the mistakes on purpose?
Yeah, my take on it was that it was on purpose. He was deliberately saying this thing to throw off the orderly there, to continue his facade, and then, because as soon as the nurse comes in, he's sharp. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows it's the end. There's no more pretense. In fact, he's kind of surprised that he's surprised that she's pretending at that point.
And she wasn't just a nurse.
No.
She was not Nancy Moriarty.
But even that, I wonder if that was his imagination, right? I mean, that just seems to not fit with everything. And when the heck did Moriarty, have a kid? And that, this would probably be great-granddaughter at this point in time. So, I mean, that would be another question I'd have, like, is this real, or is this, is this like slight trick of the mind, where you have to question whether Holmes is really fully, or does he still have all of his faculties at this point?
From that perspective, I mean, if you're going to go that far to question the faculties of the elderly man, you could question whether he actually is Sherlock Holmes. He might just be delusional about everything, which would explain his getting the facts wrong.
And that's how the story starts, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's an interesting story. I liked it. I thought it was kind of fun. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Sean, I like your comment there. Yes, that is definitely a nod to From Hell, that Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell's graphic novel about Jack the Ripper. Absolutely.
Yeah, and shared publisher, though. So Box Office Poison was Alex Robinson's book that was being published around the time by Top Shelf. And it wasn't for another couple of years, I think, that they actually collected that and published it, collected From Hell and published it as well. So I found that to be a key.
Gary?
Yeah.
You want to do McDonald's? Sure.
What?
I think Ron left his mic on. That's all.
I think Ron just fell off his perch.
Yeah. Brian, just because it's already getting close to 10:50, I think it'd be a good time now just to pause. Maybe we can come back to the discussion, but I would love for to stop sharing for a second for Jerry to show us some of his pieces. Let me stop sharing for a sec. So Jerry, I'll put you on speaker view. And if you just want to talk a little about some of your pieces that you have for the comics, that'd be great.
I'll wait till you get the screen.
You're up now.
You're up.
Okay.
You're at full speaker view.
Okay, well, just a little background from me. I've been collecting Sherlock for over almost 50 years. About 15 years ago, I sold my Holmes rare book collection, about 15,000 books, to 2 different dealers, and then continued on collecting my art, which you're either born a collector or you're not. My mom was an antique dealer and collector and an artist, so I grew up around art my whole life. And I began.
I can get breakfast anymore. I can't get breakfast.
Back in, as I said, almost 50 years ago. No, somebody's mic is on.
Ron, you better mute him. Okay.
Sorry. I began by contacting artists in those days. No email, of course, handwriting letters. And the artists couldn't care less about their artwork. Once it was done, they would throw it out, or the publishers would throw it out. And if you wrote to them and asked them for it, they'd give it to you. So I would write to all kinds of artists and say, I saw your Sherlock Holmes character that you did in such and such newspaper. Is it still available? Do you still have it? And if so, can I have it? And they say, give me your address. And they mailed it to me. So in the beginning, many years, it was great finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because I was getting all this incredible art for free. Then, unfortunately, about 15 years ago or so, artists began to realize that their work was worth money. And then I had to start paying, unfortunately, which was the downside to it. But in that process, I also, a side thing from that is that I became good friends with several artists for many years. Dan Wilson was a friend for 40 years. Same with Will Elder, one of the original artists from Mad Magazine. And so it was hard for me when Derek asked me to show some stuff. I didn't want to take over the whole meeting, because my collection runs about 4,000 pieces. And everything from early comic strips starting in about early 1900s up to an original Sidney Paget, original Holmes drawing from The Resident Patient. Those of you who might be familiar with it, it's the one with Holmes sniffing the cigar and holding the cigar case. So I'll start by showing this one, since the comic had been shown. This is the only known existing cover. Excuse me for the glare, because it's under glass. But if you can see it, this is the only known existing Classics Illustrated cover. It's the painting, plus I also have the 2 stories, the interior artwork for it, The Speckled Band and Study in Scarlet. You see on the back, I have the actual comic. Is on the back of the art. One of the other ones that you showed was the Sherlock Holmes one-off DC.
Yes.
I own all the artwork for it, and this is the frontispiece.
Right.
Now, interesting thing about this is when I purchased the artwork from the artist Cruz, E.R. Cruz, he did not have the frontispiece. So he recreated the frontispiece for me. Years later, a friend of mine had the frontispiece that he had gotten somewhere else. So we swapped, and I bought this from my friend along with the redone piece and got the original frontispiece to go with the artwork that I already owned. So there's that. Now the Marvel comic, the Marvel kind of comic magazine that was shown, that was done, the artwork was Val Mayrick. Val was a friend who visited here several times. And I do own a good portion of the artwork from that DC. I did not bring that today. It was hard to figure out what I was going to show because I didn't want to take up the whole time. But this is a magazine, a comic from 1973. Can you see it? There.
Yeah. House of Secrets.
Yeah, and this is the page one, the Case of the Demon Spawn. That is that, and I also have all of the artwork for that particular story.
Wow.
Let me grab up another one. This one is a holy grail piece because when I tell you the name of the artist, if you, as you are familiar with comics, Will Eisner. Will Eisner is the, as far as I'm concerned, the Mount Olympus top illustrator ever of comic books. This is the only time he ever drew Holmes. It's the Spirit and Holmes. Of course, Eisner created the Spirit.
Right.
This was done for the 1987 UK Comic Art Convention. Eisner was the guest of honor, and this drawing was done for the program for the convention.
Oh, Jim Bakey.
So it's Holmes and the Spirit, and Holmes is saying, looking for the UK CAC 87 elementary, my dear Spirit.
Mm.
So there's that one. This one is kind of near and dear to my heart. It's one of the earlier pieces. John Romita Sr. drew this for me.
That's great. Yeah. He was the second guy to illustrate Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, he and Stan Lee helped create Spider-Man. And just recently, I ran into a friend who DM'd me. I didn't know him that very well, but he was very close friends with John Romita Jr. and Sr. And I showed him a picture of this, and he took that picture and showed it to John Sr., who did this 35 years ago for me. And he remembered doing it. So now the gentleman's going to try and get Junior to do one for me as well. I've got two more pieces that I wanted to show. And if you have any questions, just speak up.
Steve Ditko really was the artist that helped Stan Lee create Spider-Man, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
Steve Ditko is also, unfortunately, I don't have an original Ditko.
It wasn't John Romita, though.
People do.
He was the second guy to draw.
And if you're familiar with Basil of Baker Street.
Oh, Eve Titus.
Not the cartoon. I'm talking the original Eve Titus books. This is a piece done for me by Paul Galdone, who illustrated the original pieces. Eve was a good friend. She'd visited here several times.
Wow.
What he did was, and I have two versions of this. One he did for me and one he did for someone else, and I acquired it from a collection. But this is the recreation of the actual frontispiece to the very first Basil book. I had Galdone recreate the same exact scene, except I had Basil dressed in Deerstalker and Inverness.
Wow.
And then the last piece, again, it was hard to pick out what I was going to.
Wow.
But this one, if you're familiar with Gus Mager, Sherlocko the Monk, or later as Watso, this is from 1912. It's one of the only existing pages from that when it was Sherlocko the Monk.
Right.
By Gus Mager. It's from 1912. I do have some Frank Giacoia originals.
Is that how you pronounce it, Giacoia?
Giacoia, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But as I said, it was hard to pick out. I've got a lot more, of course, comic art, but we'd be here all day.
Sure.
Steve, if you ask Steve Mason at some point, he's been here. He's looked through. I think, Steve, did you look through all the portfolio books?
Oh yeah, but you still didn't show the best one. So
which one is that?
Charles Schultz is drawing a Snoopy.
Oh, well, two things. Schultz, I wrote to Charles Schultz, who gets, who at the time would get, 10,000 requests. Can you draw me Snoopy? Can you draw me Charlie Brown? So I wrote him and then asked if he would do Snoopy as Holmes for me, because he had a real affinity for Holmes. And a few weeks later, he did a quick drawing of Snoopy dressed as Holmes. Then a few months later, I actually called his office. Originally, I called his house and I asked for him, and his wife said, "Oh no, honey, he's over at his office at 1 Snoopy Plaza. Here's the phone number. Go call him over there." But a few months later, after he had done that drawing for me, there was a 4-panel daily of Charlie Brown handing Snoopy, who's on top of the doghouse, the Hound of the Beaglevilles. So I called back and I said, "Can I buy that piece?" And she talked to Schultz, and she said, "No, he'll just give it to you." So I kept it for about 30 years, and then I put it up for auction after he passed away at Heritage Auction. Oh, okay. Judy went and got it.
There you go.
Oh.
Oh,
there you go, Steve.
Wow.
It will be mine one of these days.
Yeah, damn. You are the
But anyway,
Ackerman of Sherlockians.
There's only one of them.
I sold the 4-panel daily to Heritage Auction Galleries for quite a lot of money. I won't tell you how much. They took it and put it up for auction, and it only sold for half. Oh, that's an odd piece up there.
What
Is
is
this
Yeah.
your screen?
This is looks like Derek's computer.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Ron.
Sorry, Ron had somehow shared his screen.
Oh, anyway, it sold for half of what they bought it from me for, but my check cashed, so I'm.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, that's kind of a small, tiny sampling of that. Maybe if I do a longer presentation, I've got a PowerPoint of about 40 or so pieces on there.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say that, Jerry. So Jerry has kindly volunteered to give one of the talks in the fall. Hopefully, yeah, I think on showing more of his work as pieces. That was just a brief one. I can't imagine with the 40 you're going to show us. So you have lots of our jaws dropping throughout the whole presentation, Jerry, and maybe some of us shedding some tears. They're really, really impressive.
As far as the pageant goes, I had 5 original steels, but I sold 4 of them to get the pageant. And then I recently acquired a new Frederick Doris steel that was done as a book plate for a gentleman in about 1930 or so. Strangely, it was on eBay.
Jerry, maybe this is an appropriate time to say great jumping cats.
Yeah.
Well, I will put out the blanket invitation that I tell any Sherlockian, anyone who finds themselves in Portland, Oregon, who wants to come see the art collection, knock on my door. Let me know you're coming and knock on my door. All Sherlockians are welcome to see the collection if they want to.
Wow.
Just let me get that second shot and
Gary, John Gann here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. Do you have this? It's Snoopy and and Charlie Brown in bed, and Charlie Brown's reading him The Hound of the Baskervilles.
No, I've not seen that one.
Oh, okay. And the last line is Snoopy says, "And I never sleep again for the rest of my life." Yeah, I have no idea. I can't even remember where I got it from. It's just obviously a copy off the internet or something.
Well, Derek, if you don't mind, let me give the 2-minute history for those that don't know. And I gave a talk on this before. When Charles Schultz was in high school, he used to draw Sherlock Holmes pastiches, and he would, go down to the 5 and dime and buy the drawing paper and stuff, and he would actually write out the story and draw Sherlock Holmes pastiches, and he would give them to a friend of his in high school named Sherman. Well, when he first started drawing Peanuts, there was a character named Shermy and that was his tribute to his best friend in high school. Well, about 3 years into drawing Peanuts, so around 53 or 54, he decided he needed a more edgy character. And so he created a girl named Lucy Van Pelt. And he actually said in the biography in a newspaper article that he based her a lot on his favorite fictional character during high school. And even though he didn't say Sherlock Holmes, but most everybody assumed that because he was drawing Sherlock Holmes in high school. And so, if you actually look into it, there is a lot of similarities between Lucy and Sherlock Holmes. I actually called the Charles Schultz Museum a few years ago to ask about those drawings that he did in high school that he gave to Sherman. They knew about them, but nobody knows where they're at. And I guess they had reached out to Sherman's family and they didn't have them anymore. So I guess they're lost to the world. But I just think that would be the neatest thing to find those. But as Jerry said, yes, Charles Schultz loved Sherlock Holmes. And so there's several strips of Peanuts that relate to Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Hey, Jerry, this is Ray Reithmeyer.
They do.
I'm doing well. Love your shirt, by the way. I'm wearing a Yes shirt, so we got the prog rock showing up. But I know from talking with Charles Prepelick, you've got quite a number of pieces from Dan Day's Cases of Sherlock Holmes. How many of those pages do you have?
About 50.
Wow, I just got the one.
Including some covers. I have some original covers. A good friend of mine who's got a amazing collection of art also, has some of the original oil painting covers that Day did for the first original issues of his series. They're beautiful pieces. But yeah, about 50 odd pieces or so.
But I am also going to say, because I've actually been to Jerry's house twice, do not go up there thinking you're just going to spend like 30 minutes. You need to spend hours in that room because, like he said, there's over 4,000 pieces and it is simply amazing.
Well, there's only 6 people that I can think of that have actually gone through every piece of paper that I have. And Steve is one of them, but there's only about 6 people in total who've taken the time because they've been staying with us, say, for a weekend or something, because it'll take you that long to get through it all. But again, anyone who's interested and wants to see it and wants to come to Portland after all of this COVID garbage is done, give me a holler. Wow. I love showing it. I love sharing it with people. It's a little difficult living way out here in Portland, Oregon. I'm from New York originally, moved out here in the late 70s. But so I don't get as many visitors as I'd like, but anyone is welcome.
Hey, Jerry, Dory put a great question in the chat for you. Just what do we bring when we visit? Do we bring you wine? She said New York City bagels. You get to see all the best stuff.
New York bagels would do. Wine we don't drink, so wine wouldn't do any good. And you could bring me art.
There you go.
Perfect.
No, just bring yourselves. Just bring
I have
yourselves.
a question.
Go for it.
Jerry, you mentioned that you have all the art from the DC Sherlock Holmes issue. Do you also have the Simonson cover?
No, the cover I do not have. Fortunately, as far as I know, it doesn't exist. Believe me, I've searched. It's one of those things. I think in the time period and era of throw it in the garbage when we're done. Of course, the original would not be in color. The original would be black and white, and they would add the color later.
Right.
This has been a wonderful talk. But we're actually way over time, and I do want to honor people's times and commitments. Jerry, hopefully we can continue the conversation soon. Maybe if you're up for the August meeting, we could do it then, and then we just keep going.
DM me and we'll
figure it out. We always meet the first Saturday of the month at this time. It's what's turned into the tradition for the group.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up, I'm going to attempt to share my screen again. Just so you know, for the June meeting, we're going to go back to the canon. I'm going to do a talk on the Adventure of the Empty House. Dan Andriaco has asked me to do a piece on Sherlock Holmes fighting and weapons for his book that's coming out called The Essential Sherlock Holmes. And so my talk is going to be on Baritsu, air rifles, and the Great Hiatus. I'm hoping to have a draft of the article to share that time so that you guys can also provide me some feedback. And of course, we'll discuss the story as well. Round of applause for Brian for putting this presentation together, and also for Jerry for jumping in. Honestly, I asked him like 12 hours ago or something if he'd be willing to share some of his pieces. Really, really impressive, both of you guys. And I'm really glad some of you guys joined us for the first time on this topic. And it was really fun meeting. These are always one of the highlights of the month. So I really do appreciate all the people who have stepped forward to share as well. If anybody else would like to share either or read a discussion on an original Sherlock Holmes story, a pastiche, an aspect of Holmes, anything, just message me or send me an email, and I'll be happy to put you guys in the queue. It's really fun. Last month, Anna Behrens, who's over there, did a talk on the Mary Celeste and the Arthur Conan Doyle story that was inspired from. So we definitely jump around in topics. All right, so thank you, everybody. Oh, look at that. Anna's got a Holmes comic there too.
Yeah.
Hey.
Show you on the back is an ad for air guns.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Look at that. A lot of you guys, Andy's also was holding his up too. So a lot of you guys have that particular, I don't have that particular issue, so I got to get my act together here. All right. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys in June. I think it's June 2nd. It's early in June.
Jay, stay safe, Jay.
Yeah. Yes, Jay, stay safe. And everybody actually stay safe. Hopefully you're all getting vaccinated. Hopefully, as people kind of get back to seeing each other in person, we fully intend to keep this group going. So, once a month online still, because we do have people from all over the world who participate. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you again in June. So take care now.
Bye.
Or good afternoon or good morning.